colonization never ended, how the poverty, racism, militarism, ecological devastation, and Christian nationalism that we fight are the results of a country founded with genocide, enslavement, and theft. We stand with indigenous peoples in a demand for material reparations for colonization and for the false and broken promises of the U.S. government that indigenous people have rights to their own land and space. We are in unwavering solidarity with their calls for sovereignty and self-governance and the return of land and rights to live in relationship with it, including with our sisters and brothers and siblings of the Mohican and Haudenosaunee people, living peoples still today. Every time we assemble as a movement family, we welcome and encourage everyone to find and name the people whose lands they inhabit. So here today, we are on land that we call Albany now, but it was the land stewarded by the Mohican people, by the Haudenosaunee people. You can find the name of the people in the lands where you inhabit by entering your zip code at native-land.ca. So I invite you, if you have a device, pull it out for a minute and go to native-land-ca. Because we mourn the inconceivable losses of the peoples of these lands and the legal regimes we live within based on selfish and self-serving interpretations, unfortunately, of Christian scriptures. We remember with them. We are with those who live and fight now. And we commit to the work of seeking right relationship on this land.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Brown Johnson, and I am the president of the Albany NAACP. And I serve on the Poor People's Campaign in the Capital Region. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have invited you here to hear the truth about the issues impacting the poor that continue to keep New York, America, from being the equitable society that embraces, supports, and uplifts all people. The New York State Poor People's State of the State indicated that New York is the most unequal state in the nation. 45% of people in New York were poor or low income, a total of 8.6 million residents. Costs of welfare and housing are going up, and wages are not keeping the pace. More than 1 million New Yorkers are still without health insurance. Homelessness has reached its highest level since the Great Depression. Even before the pandemic, 54% of low-income households spent more than half their incomes on rent. As devastating as the pandemic was on the world, it served to shine a light on the issues impacting the daily life of poor, low-income, Black and brown people. In a nation as rich as America, Black, brown, and poor people died disproportionately exposed to the virus, displaced from their homes, suffered food insecurity, and were impacted by healthcare inadequacies, due in part to racism, classism, and a total disregard for the needs of all people. We couldn't afford to stay home and live, so many worked and died, working in service and healthcare jobs that either lacked or offered inadequate healthcare for the employees. We worked in service of others to the detriment of ourselves. What is described as an ultra-rich New Yorkers those with wealth over $30 million hold a staggering $6.7 trillion in wealth. Meanwhile, 8.6 million New Yorkers are poor and low income. New Yorkers must become alarmed by the disparity of the experiences across this beautiful mosaic of diversity that make this state and the world great. The Poor People's State of the State report indicated Black and non-Hispanic women were 5 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related causes than white non-Hispanic women. Communities of color were disproportionately impacted by medical debt. 41% of residents in communities of color have medical debt in collections, compared to 14% of residents in white communities in that county. In Monroe County, the rate is 26% in counties of color versus 7% in white communities. And in Albany County, 26% versus 10% for communities of color and white communities, respectively. In New York, Black people are 8 times more likely to be incarcerated, and Latinx people are 3 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people. In 2021, the median household income for Black and Latinx households in New York State was $54,443 and $55,245 respectively, compared to $83,392 for white households and $81,411 for Asian households. This discrepancy was more pronounced in New York City, where median income for Black, Latinx, and Asian household was $52,197, $48,316, and $72,785, compared to $97,170 for white household. At the end of his life, Dr. King was organizing a Poor People's Campaign, uniting poor people across all races and geographies to demand what he called a revolution of values, a fundamental restructuring of society to meet the needs of the poor and dispossessed. The crises he identified of racism, poverty, and militarism are in fact worse today than they were in 1968. Along with our partners around the state and nation, we are working to revive that vision and build unity and leadership among the poor to win the policies we need. We are here today to call attention to the plight of the poor, Black and brown people, and to demand that Governor Hochul listen to the people directly impacted by low, poor wages, absent or inadequate housing, food insecurity, non-existent, unequal, or inadequate health care, environmental hazards and poisons, social injustices, voter suppression, and racism. Dr. King said in his prolific I Have a Dream speech, as long as there is poverty in this world, no man can be totally rich, even if he has $1 billion. We demand policies that work for all New Yorkers. Thank you.
Oh, my back hurts. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As you all know, we live in the United States of America, a country that is filled with equality and justice for all. Just kidding. As you know, equality is something we do not have, and we sure as H-E-L-L do not have justice for all. What I'm going to say to you today, first of all, let me begin by letting you know that all of my education has been in social sciences. I understand social sciences and history very well. All of my 3 degrees, my associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees, all in social sciences. and with a minor in world history. I have been a disability rights advocate for the past 37 years, and I have been advocating to eliminate injustice personally over half a century. I have spoken in the White House. I have done much to end, or try to at least end, put a notch in ending discrimination and injustice. But I'm going to speak to you today about something that affects all of us, but you're not even really aware of it until it happens. And I'll begin by saying that this country has what we call, when I say we, I mean people with disabilities, an institutional bias. And that's what I'm going to speak about today, is this institutional bias. You may know that when we refer to institutions, we think of them as what they are in terms of organizations. That is, that we have our political institutions, and we have our social institutions, and we have our economic institutions, institutions of higher learning. We're just all about institutions. The other part, though, of institutions has to do with an established law or practice or custom. I'm going to concentrate on that one. And what I'm talking about is the fact that in our country, our healthcare system tracks people into institution. What do I mean? What I mean is that, first of all, as those of us, at least with disabilities, know, that we do not have the community infrastructure for people with disabilities to have full access to our society's goods, practices, and activities. We just don't. The discrimination that we encounter is on a daily basis, if nothing else, simply for the lack of access. In fact, just the other day, my sister-in-law said to me, she used a scooter for the first time. I had always been telling her that she should use a scooter. She has difficulties walking. And she used it for the first time, I think she was in Las Vegas, I'm not really sure. The point is, she found out that when they say something is accessible, it is not accessible many times. And she found that out for the first time, and that's when I told her, well, Maria, this is what we encounter every day. You just tried the scooter this time and found out what it's like. People who are wheelchair users have this nonsense all the time. So, this institutional tracking, what happens? Well, what happens is that when you become ill, and you go to a hospital, if you can't recover right away, because as you know, doctors are our gods on earth, and if they can't fix something, good Lord, they're lost. And people with disabilities are people you cannot fix. Because our disability is no different than the color of our hair, or the color of our eyes, or how tall we are, or how fat we are, or whatever it is that we are. It's just who we are. It is not something to be fixed. It is something to look at and see what it is that we can do to make society more accessible so that we all can benefit from the goods and programs and activities that all of you can enjoy. So, our system, as wonderful as it is, allows private insurance companies to get away with not paying for personal assistance services, home care workers, and many other programs that will help people with disabilities become more independent. As some of you know, we have been fighting to ensure that home care workers and personal assistance service folks get the proper pay, 150% of which the governor vetoed. We had a bill that passed the legislation that would call for what we call visitability. Visitability means that some of you actually may have friends who are wheelchair users. Can they visit you in your house? I believe there's a great chance that they cannot, because most houses are inaccessible. And we are continuing to build houses that are inaccessible. So we had this bill called visitability. Visitability meaning that someone can visit you, as I said. And it would allow for the pathway and the entrance of a house to be accessible, and a bathroom on the first floor to be accessible. All of this, the governor vetoed. Just like she vetoed the increased pay for home care workers. So how can we implement Olmstead? Many of you don't know what Olmstead probably is, but in 1999, the Supreme Court passed a judgment on a case called Olmstead. In Olmsted were two women from Georgia who had disabilities and wanted to live in the community, but of course Georgia, and you know the state of Georgia, did not want that. So they took them to court, went to the Supreme Court, and they won their case. By winning their case, it allowed, or at least was supposed to, allow every state to put a program together to implement Olmsted to ensure that people live in the community and not in institutions. The state of New York has been trying to do this since 2002 and has gotten absolutely, in my opinion, nowhere. And the governor could have helped right now when she signed that, if she had signed the visitability bill, which she did not do, she could have helped when if she signed the bill the legislature passed to ensure that home care workers and personal assistance services get paid. She refused to do that too. So I don't go over. As you all know, Martin Luther King had a dream. But to me, it is up to us to make that dream into reality. As such, when Martin Luther King talked about people and the fact that we need to judge people differently, we need to judge us meaning people with disabilities. And I believe this to be so. So in other words, Martin Luther King had a dream about this, and now I know as an advocate, as a disability rights advocate, and all the people that I work with, including all of you, that we are working for and will continue to work for equality for all. Therefore, as such, I know that one day, with every individual that makes up our society, we will treat people with disabilities not by the nature of their disability, but by the content of their character and their ability to do all the things that everyone else can do, as long as we treat everybody with dignity and respect and allow the reasonable accommodations and access that we require for us to have the same access to society that everyone else does. Thank you very much.
Thank everyone for coming out tonight. I don't know if any of you have heard why I do what I do, but I'm all in on single-payer universal health care. We had a chance last year, I think we had the votes on both the Senate and the Assembly to pass the New York Health Act. I've spoken with Carl Heastie myself, and I explained to Carl Heastie, and the reason that he has not to call the New York Health Act is why he's supporting my son's murderers. You see, back in 2019, my son Danny had come to live with us. He was 29 years old. He had had some domestic problems with his girlfriend, with the mother of his child. And because of that, there was legal issues involved. And he couldn't communicate with his baby's mother, which is where he received his mail. Well, after he moved in with me, he was on a medication called risperidone. And he comes home one day, he says, "Pops, I went to get my medication refilled today and found out my insurance had been canceled." You see, Danny was on the ACA's Managed Medicaid program. At the time, New York had instituted a $20 premium for anybody making a certain dollar amount on Medicaid. Danny wasn't aware that this new premium had been made, thus didn't pay it. Now, I might mention that Danny had secured 4 different jobs within the 1 month he lived with me. 4 jobs. And he still didn't have health insurance.
Not right.
He had Medicaid until he missed his $20 premium. So when Danny tells me that he didn't have the medication, I was like, "Not a big deal, Danny. How much is it?" And he tells us the medication was $250. Joe got me down here giving me gas money today. I don't have $250 to pay for Danny's medication today. I didn't have it that day either. I was like, "Okay, Danny, you have an appointment with your therapist in a couple of weeks. I'm sure she can help you out. In the meantime, you need to get a hold of Fidelis and find out what's going on." That's when he learned he missed a $20 payment. He pulled out his credit card and he paid that $20 on the phone that day. Where they told Danny, your plan will be reinstated on the next billing cycle, May 1st. Risperidone, known suicidal risk upon withdrawals. April 9th, about 11:23 in the morning, I see his Facebook post telling that he couldn't get above the pain. He decided death by drowning. He had super glued his seatbelt shut, said goodbye to his 2 children, and drove his truck into the Mohawk River. I saw his post 32 seconds after he posted it. I live 5 minutes from Saratoga Lake, and there was a picture of the cab of his truck overlooking the water. And I didn't know where he was. I assumed he was at Saratoga Lake, so I jumped in my car and was to save him. After a while, I realized there's no way anybody could survive this long. I had to return to tell my wife that her boy was dead because it was late, paying $20 to his Medicaid plan. To highlight the cruelty of our system, Centene in 2018 was worth $60.1 billion. Fidelis Care was sold to Centene. This is why I watch Centene so closely. Fast forward 2 years later, during the height of the pandemic, they doubled their net value to $111.8 billion. As it was mentioned earlier, 1 out of 3 COVID deaths could have been avoided if we had a single-payer universal health care system. I invite everybody to do everything they can to get the New York Health Act passed. We had a chance to pass it 2 years ago, and our Assembly and our Senate Speaker decided not to call for a vote because we had the votes to pass it. There is no way that we are going to get Medicare for all even close to our current federal administration until we have a real ground game going. We need people in the streets every day holding up signs, screaming the names of our lost loved ones, screaming the tortures. 500,000 Americans will go bankrupt this year due to medical debt, and not one Canadian. Not one Canadian. Thank you all for coming out. I'd also like to mention April 9th this year will be Easter Sunday. Last year, I called out Fidelis Care. The founder of Fidelis Care is a father, Patrick Frawley. He sold Fidelis Care to Centene for $3.9 billion and maintains the VP of Centene, now holding a salary of $5.9 million, to guide poorest among us the health care they need to live on Medicaid. I'll be calling out this hypocrisy on the anniversary of Danny's death in New York City. I'll give Joe the information I have to sign a page for it. Thank you all.
Thank you. My plight began with my father. My dad served in World War II and the Korean War, and when his tours ended, he was afforded the opportunity of the GI Bill. With those funds, he purchased property that was under foreclosure. He owned a small construction company called Do Right Construction, just him and 2 of his friends. They rehabbed the properties and rented them out to low-income families. So from my early childhood, my first thoughts of the relationship between landlords and tenants was one of utilitarianism, where being a landlord was a needed service, promoting happiness for the greater good. One that empowers the community, since we are all in it together. See, back then, the landlord lived in the community that she or he rented. Then an unfortunate series of events led to my incarceration. Shortly into my bid, the properties left to me by my father were stolen by a pair who committed mortgage fraud against many of my neighbors as well. Having lost my home due to incarceration, when preparing for my return to society, I searched for housing through transitional services, but none was available to me due to having a scarlet letter of incarceration. As a returning citizen without a home to return to, finding decent, affordable, non-judgmental housing consumed nearly all of my time. As a result, my early childhood vision of the happy landlord living in the community and being in service to the tenants became skewed. My dad didn't ask for a credit or a criminal background check. With 2/3 of New Yorkers having been arrested, who would he have rented to? The fight. So when I graduated from law school, I did an internship with Albany County Public Defender's Office at 2 different night courts, and then wrote judicial decisions for a city court judge. But having been incarcerated myself, I knew I wouldn't win every case. I didn't want to be responsible for an innocent person, or any person for that matter, becoming incarcerated and losing their home, children, and possibly their life. Knowing that I didn't want to practice criminal law, I entered the realm of civil law and found my happy place. I am determined to make these landlords become the needed service providers and committed to the community in which they rent. Landlords who rent for the greatest good. The Insight, as the founder and executive director of a woman, Black and Brown owned 501c3 nonprofit organization, I provide legal services to tenants facing eviction everywhere in every court in Albany County. I do this work because it's needed, and when I began this work years ago, no one else was doing it. I fight for my younger self, who revered a loving landlord, also known as my dad, so that single moms, veterans, disabled citizens, seniors, returning citizens, Generation XYZ, empty nesters, all those who seek a decent, affordable home. Just that, a decent, affordable home. My fight is to bring the good landlord back. Thank you.
So my name is Tiana Taylor. I am the co-director of policy and communications with the Release Aging People in Prison campaign. I'm also the daughter of an incarcerated father who's been incarcerated for nearly 20 years now and will soon go before the parole board. RAP, or Release Aging People in Prison, is a grassroots, statewide, member-based organization that was founded by 3 formerly incarcerated people, 2 of which are no longer with us, and one of which is still in the fight. We work to end mass incarceration and promote racial justice through the release of older people in prison, as well as those serving long and life sentences in New York State. We also work on human rights issues for folks incarcerated. While aging is in our name, we advocate for all incarcerated people and their families. We believe in safety, healing, and justice. We believe in redemption and second chances. We fight racism and work for racial justice, and we know that our current system does none of this. Even as the state's overall prison population has declined, the percentage of incarcerated older adults has increased. 1 in 4 incarcerated people in New York State are 50 and over. The vast majority are Black and brown people. We make up, in some areas, 90% of the incarcerated population and only 15% of the general population. With roughly 9,000 people in New York serving life sentences, our state ranks among the harshest in the nation, surpassing states like Texas and Georgia. Our work is about shortening sentences and expanding opportunities for release and supporting people's safe re-entry to our communities. We do this by organizing and advocating. We do community outreach. We hold community events in town halls. We lead demonstrations, marches, and advocacy days at the state capitol. We're actually going to have a huge advocacy day this Wednesday, and I hope some folks here can join us for that. We get media coverage that highlights our members' and leaders' stories, and we do so much more. We do this from Buffalo to Long Island. We believe that people directly impacted by the criminal justice system have power. We don't just tell our stories, we are leaders in the movement to change our lives and the lives of our family members. We currently lead 2 campaigns and do work in a 3rd campaign. We lead the People's Campaign for Parole Justice and the hashtag Hope Will Bring Them Home campaign for clemency. And we're also working on a campaign to ensure incarcerated people have basic human rights, including access to fresh food through family care packages and continued access to contact visits. Now I'll go over the People's Campaign for Parole Justice platform that we have. We have 2 legislative bills in this platform. One is the Elder Parole Bill. This bill says that anyone that is deemed an older adult by the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, which happens to be the age 55 due to accelerated aging behind bars, and if that individual has served at least 15 years of their current sentence, they will get an individualized parole hearing. The next, and I'll just say, this is really looking to combat those extremely long sentences. You know, when someone is given 70 years, 90 years, they're not going to live that sentence out, and so this is really for those folks. As it stands, the average age of natural death behind bars, natural, I don't think anything's natural about prisons, but is the age 58, and so we're really intentional with that number of 55. The other bill we're fighting for is the Fair and Timely Parole Bill. This bill says that anyone who's already parole eligible and goes before the parole board must be looked at holistically for who they are today. And so while the parole board will still look at the nature of the crime, they will also have to really look at any rehabilitative programming, any educational attainments, any letters in support, and everything else the person has done since incarcerated when looking to release them. As it stands, most people are released simply for the nature of their crime, the one thing they will never be able to change. A core foundation of our campaign is that everyone deserves a second chance, so neither of these bills excludes any category of people based on crime or sentence. We truly believe and we know that many people change their lives, including those who have caused serious harm. The other thing that we're doing under the People's Campaign for Parole Justice is looking for a fair and fully staffed parole board. There can be 19 commissioners on the parole board. Right now there's 14. Governor Hochul made a promise last January to fully staff the parole board, and she has not. So we're holding her to that as well. We want the parole board to be staffed with people who believe in second chances and redemption, not just punitive figures like ex-law enforcement. Over the 4 years that we've had this campaign, we have built support in both the Senate and Assembly for our legislative bills. And just last January, Hochul did announce a commitment to fully staff the parole board. And so, especially for the Fair and Timely and Elder Parole Bill, we're looking at 2023, it's got to be. Every 3 days someone passes behind bars, way more than on Rikers Island. It's just, they don't have to report in docs, so we don't hear about it. And so we're really looking to get this done so no one else has to lose family members behind bars. Now we'll talk just briefly about the other 2 campaigns that we're involved with. We have our clemency campaign, hashtag Hope Will Bring Them Home. This calls on Governor Hochul to grant clemencies frequently, meaning not just once a year during the holidays. It's not a gift. Clemency should be given year-round. The next is inclusively, so really looking at each person on a case-by-case basis and not denying anyone just for the type of crime. And also transparently. As it stands, so many people, thousands of people, have no idea where their clemency application is. It's probably sitting in a corner, gathering dust in Hochul's offices. And so we want that to be much more transparent. So this campaign is really like public pressure on Governor Hochul to do what she needs to do. We bird dog her at events. We get media to talk about it, and we want to hold her to her promises, because she also said she was going to grant clemencies more than once a year, and she granted them only during the holidays once again. So the third thing that we are involved with is a campaign to ensure incarcerated people have basic human rights, including access to fresh food through family care packages and continued access to contact visits, as I mentioned before. We understand that taking away packages paired with limiting access to a short list of vendors, as well as frequently increasing the commissary prices, has a catastrophic effect on our families and communities. We're coming together with other allied organizations to call for a repeal of the package ban. And I'll just end by saying, the prison industrial complex is yet another way that the government and elite private businesses are extracting labor, money, and our literal family members from our communities. Our incarcerated loved ones are paid pennies for forced labor inside of these facilities, while commissary prices have skyrocketed. Our loved ones are forced to pay 2 to 3 times more for food and hygiene products, while being paid 15 cents to our $15 minimum wage. It's ridiculous. So we are doing all we can to fight for freedom of our loved ones as a means to bring them home. We don't want our loved ones incarcerated any longer. These are our fathers, our mothers, our mentors, the violence interrupters in our communities, and so much more. And we know that bringing them home will strengthen our communities and aid public safety. So I will have a bunch of literature talking about our Advocacy Day on Wednesday. I really hope some folks can join here, and we also have a link to sign up for the campaign. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today. Thank you for inviting me. I'm here to give my testimony on today about what I've experienced being a part of the Albany community and being an advocate for the people and doing outreach, and also being a person that was in need as well. I was a full-time worker, single mom, church member, who needed help, who fell on hard times, and I had to go down to DSS to get help with services. I needed assistance with back rent because due to COVID, the job that I worked, I didn't receive payment for being out because my daughter caught COVID and had asthma. And I had 2 children that caught COVID during that time. So my rent got backed up a little, and I didn't receive any pay for that because it wasn't directly me. They wouldn't help or assist. So I went down to DSS to fill out the application to receive assistance. And when I went there, it was a very depressing environment. The atmosphere was very embarrassing and humiliating. The workers, even though, the workers are limited and they're under a lot of pressure, which I get that, they weren't very friendly and helpful at all. They made the experience very horrific. It was to the point where I just would rather suffer whatever the consequences were going to be than actually go through the process to receive help. And in me doing so, I went through it anyhow, and I brought everything that was needed back to them, such as any paperwork and documentation that they had asked for. I did that as they asked. I did email just to cover my tracks to make sure I had proof. They ended up denying me. They wouldn't give me child care because I had a baby that needed to go to daycare. And I already had the job, but I was having someone watch my child, which was coming directly, for me. So that was no longer realistic. So I had also to ask them for that. They denied me for that as well. Then once I got denied for all those things, and I told the worker, well, once you deny me and then I don't have childcare, how am I gonna sustain my job? How am I gonna be able to pay the rent that I'm asking you guys to assist me with? I'm not lazy, I'm not a leech, I'm none of those things. I'm a worker just as you are, and I'm just asking for a hand up, not a hand out. And when they did that, at that particular time, I had ended up losing the job because no child care equals no job equals no rent being paid. So I am here today to speak on that and to shed light that even the process to get help, to get on your feet is just very, very, very horrible. It's horrible. Everybody that goes down there does not need to be prejudged to think that all of us that go down there have this negative agenda or motive. Some of us are hard workers, are family people that have children, grandchildren, that, are a part of the community, because I work in the community, I do outreach, I'm out in the streets, I'm helping pray for people, I'm helping give meals in any way that I can. So now the same community that I serve in, I couldn't receive that same help myself, which feels horrible. Because it's like you're trying to make your community a better place, but you yourself can't get that help when it's your turn. And the way for us to uplift each other is to help one another. If one falls down, you pull the other up. That's how we'll maintain our whole community. And we need assistance with that. We need advocates to come in with people and help be a voice for them when they're going in these places and they can't quite understand what's being told to them, or they can't verbalize exactly what it is that they need. We need more advocates, more people to go in with the community to do those one-on-one interviews with them and to hold them accountable when they're denying people for reasons that make no sense or that are not true, or just because they want to push you to the point where you actually give up and you don't want to complete the process. So we need someone fighting for the rights of the community against what is happening in DSS. And thank you guys for having me.
5 months ago, as I sat in a motel room and took my calmest breath in hours, I looked at the crack of dawn through flimsy blinds and knew, this is the first day of the rest of my life. I just escaped years of psychological torture that started to turn into physical abuse in a household that I had no choice but to live in for the last few of my teen years, thanks to losing my mother to suicide. But that wasn't the end game. With the help of the cash that I had and the kindness of strangers, I started renting an inexpensive room and quickly applied for a job at Amazon's Albany 1 warehouse nearby. But the first and second paychecks weren't sufficient. I was no longer just aware of the class struggle, but experiencing it. I was aware and supportive of the union drive, but I was too afraid of retaliation. But after a couple of weeks of near injuries, mentally stressful quotas, fake fairness, and false opportunities, I became less afraid and more fed up. And since I was no longer in the household, where I had to be silent and secretive just to survive, I was no longer satisfied with being a silent supporter and just fighting for myself. Thanks to their yellow vests instead of the typical orange, with the words Amazon Labor Union Lead Organizer printed on the back, I easily identified and then awkwardly approached the lead organizers. They enthusiastically brought me up to speed and gave me a copy of labor law for the rank and filer, which taught me my rights at work and how to spot an unfair labor practice that warrants a charge. I learned about the ins and outs of the ALU and other Amazon union drives. During my breaks and days off, I attended meetings, passed out literature, translated literature, campaigned on social media, designed a flyer, tabled, and phone bank, because I wanted to be as active as I could. And since I started wearing a yellow ALU vest, which I still wear to work, my coworkers turned to me for questions and help. Instead of being neutral or at least complying with labor laws, our employer chose to be hostile. Employee relations consultants, as they were called, through interrogation and surveillance, identified union supporters and organizers, several of which were subject to unjust disciplinary action and even termination. Captive audience meetings threatened our benefits and implied that we'd be forced to strike if the union would win the election. The closer we got to election week, colossal banners saying "Vote No" covered the warehouse, while our portable pro-union flyers and brochures were being taken down. But we didn't let that intimidate us. During their captive audience meetings, we would challenge misinformation when the floor was open for questions and comments. We had mass print runs of literature and kept putting them back up. Yet the union busting was effective. Excluding challenged and void ballots, we lost the election 406 to 206, but I refuse to call it a total failure. We organized 206 workers. We built and grew a diverse women-led organizing committee. We reduced the fear and silence in our workplace culture. We garnered national public support from countless organizations, even politicians, and most importantly, fellow workers. And we helped our coworkers such as by hosting free dinners, fundraising, connecting them with workers' compensation lawyers and labor lawyers, and defending them at work during disciplinary meetings. And we are still demanding $27 an hour, rates twice as long, equipment repairs, and many more. My fight is full of learning experiences. As a queer woman of color, a second-generation American, and an abuse survivor, I know firsthand that workers' rights are intersectional. I've learned the importance of outreach, of working through cultural and language barriers instead of ignoring them. And it's essential, especially after a union election loss, to still build worker power. Collective action over collective grievances is meaningful whether it's in the name of a specific union or not. Such as, about a month ago, during the holiday season, they tried to impose a mandatory 6-day, 60-hour work week, while the usual agreement is a 5-day, 50-hour work week during the holiday season. But we all complained to each other and to management. It was all anyone would talk about on the floor and during breaks. And guess what? The 60-hour work week was never imposed. And perhaps the most layered lesson I've learned is that I cannot address my oppression without addressing the systemic oppression that enabled it. A system that traps suicide loss survivors, children who are suicide loss survivors, and abuse survivors into endless cycles of abuse and instability. That does not work for workers or marginalized groups because we were never meant to enjoy the fruits of our labor, just the scraps of hoarded fruits. But we can change it together, acknowledging our own privilege and educating ourselves, having constructive conversations with each other, practicing mutual aid, holding our elected officials accountable just as we are doing today, and calling for public policy change, such as the recently passed Warehouse Workers Protection Act, and what is still has not yet been signed into law, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, are a few examples. But these are just a few ways we can get admittedly incremental but significant change. And another thing that I've learned, due to circumstances beyond my control and of course trauma, I often find myself hopeless, bitter, and angry at 18. But instead of accepting my fate and letting those fester into unhealthy coping mechanisms, I will use those as fuel to seek a better future, not just for myself, but for everyone that I can help. Thank you.
At the end of his life, Dr. King said, the dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, face a cruelly unjust society. And that is what we have heard about. We have heard about the cruelties of our society. But he also said, if the poor can be helped to take action together, that they would be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. The systems that we live under, the oppressions that we live under, count on us being complacent. They count on taking away people's health care over a $20 premium and no one fighting back. They count on immense wealth of $1 trillion corporation grinding workers into the ground and no one speaking up or fighting back. They count on locking people away for decades and no one fighting back. They count on real estate industries and the awful landlords that we've heard about and no one fighting back. But what we are doing here is coming together, not helping in a charity sort of way, but helping to take action together, collective action, to change these systems, to end these oppressions. In the New York State Poor People's Campaign, we have called this the Poor People's State of the State. If you didn't know, this is the third of 3 events like this happening around the state this weekend. The first one was in Rochester on Saturday, in Long Island yesterday, where we heard similar stories. You can find the recordings online on our Facebook page. But we're just getting started. As my friend Deborah mentioned, our campaign put forward a report. In contrast to the governor's state of the state, which is really a state of the rich, we are demanding that our governor acknowledge the reality of poverty in New York State and meet with directly impacted leaders of the New York State Poor People's Campaign. We have a petition. It's a very simple action that everyone can take, and I hope you will. It's not our only action, obviously. We are building power across this state in our communities to demand not only that our voices be heard, but that the needed actions be taken by those in power. Now, I should say, before we launched our petition, we did reach out to the governor. And her office got back to us and invited us to meet with a commissioner of a particular agency. Now, we turned it down because we, think about it this way. When the real estate industry calls up the governor's office, do you think she sends a commissioner to meet with them? When the hospital association or the pharmaceutical companies call the governor's office, do you think she just sends out some of her staff members to meet with them? No. We, the poor and dispossessed of this state, cannot afford to throw $1,000 a plate fundraisers to the governor in order to get our voices in her ear. So we have to demand it, and we have to organize for it. And as you heard in that video, you only ever get what you are organized to take. And so that is what we are doing. So I want to invite you all to go to our website, nyspppc.org, and add your name to that petition. Read the report that is linked on that site. You can read our response to the governor's speech as well. The report is a tool. It's not comprehensive, it's not the longest thing, but it is a tool for you to take into your communities and reflect and learn with others and engage in political education to develop our communities, to strengthen our communities for the fights ahead and the fights that are ongoing right now. We are not stopping here, right? A few years ago, Reverend Barber, co-chair of our national campaign, spoke here in Albany on MLK weekend, and he said, I don't celebrate Dr. King anymore. He said, because when leaders like Dr. King fall, the thing you do is pick up the baton and carry it forward. And that is what we are doing when we seek to shift the narrative by shifting the narrative, hearing from those who are directly impacted, by building unity and leadership among the poor and dispossessed, and by demanding that policy and elections change to hear the voices of the poor and the priorities of the poor. So you can sign the petition, you can read and share the report, but we know that while we have incredible speakers here, many of you have important stories that we need to hear. And so we have an ongoing media project. That short video you saw of people all around the state sharing their stories is just the start. And so Nicholson's going to wave his hand in the back. After our event this evening, we invite you to hang out. Head down the hallway and to the right. You'll find them. But we are asking that you would be courageous and brave and take a few minutes and share your story, right? Share your experiences with these interlocking injustices. I promise, our media team, which you just got a little taste of in that video, they are top-notch, and they will make you look good when they weave this together with voices from all around our state. We have our partner agencies and organizations like Caring Majority have materials here, like Release Aging People from Prison, so make sure that you hang out and check out some of their materials. Also, we have a meal, by the way, provided by the South End Grocery, which is an amazing community project. Please do not run away, because I do not want to take all that food home myself. I cannot take all that food home myself. We need you to gather and have some. We have asked that for the safety of our community, folks wear masks for this event. Obviously, to sit and eat in that dining hall, we will need to take masks off. If you are uncomfortable with that, we understand, and we can try and help you maybe pack some food to go. But just want to everyone's doing their best in these trying circumstances. So just understanding the circumstances, we're doing the best we can. Folks, get connected with this campaign. I don't think there's anything else like it happening around this country. I think it's critical that we build this unity across the lines of division that the ruling class wants to sow amongst our class.
It's under my